When President Alberto Fujimori took over the presidency of Peru, he never expected or anticipated one event that would come to shape and define his tenure in office. Even though he rose to power on the promise of ending terrorism in the South American country, he had no premonition that his presidency would be confronted with a terrorist act so daring that he would need a radical approach outside the box to deal with it. This is the extraordinary story of how Peruvian commandos carried out the most audacious raid to rescue 72 hostages from the captivity of the popular MRTA terrorists in Lima, the capital of the country, in 1996. This is the story of one of the most daring and high-profile hostage crises of the 20th century. This is the siege of the Japanese ambassador's residence in Peru. On a warm summer evening in Lima, Peru, December 17, 1996, the Japanese ambassador's residence shimmered with light and laughter. Diplomats, government officials, and business leaders had gathered to celebrate the 63rd birthday of Emperor Akihito of Japan. But behind the high walls and manicured gardens, none could anticipate the chaos that was about to unfold. At approximately 8:30 p.m., a group of 14 armed militants stormed the mansion. They were members of the Tupac Amaru revolutionary movement, known by its Spanish acronym MRTA. Dressed as waiters and using smuggled explosives, they blasted through security, firing their weapons and ordering everyone to the ground. 450 people were taken hostage within minutes. The world would soon be watching. The MRTA was a Marxist rebel group formed in the 1980s and inspired by the revolutionary legacy of indigenous leader Tupac Amaru. Their aim to overthrow the Peruvian government and replace it with a socialist state. By the mid-1990s, their power had waned. The Shining Path, a more radical Maoist insurgency, had overshadowed them. With dwindling support and mounting defeats, the MRTA needed to make a statement. This siege was their gamble to demand the release of over 400 imprisoned comrades, including their leader, Victor Campos. Among the hostages were top Peruvian officials, foreign diplomats, military officers, retired Admiral Luis Jampitri, a very senior figure in Peru's intelligence circle, and business elites, including the former president of Peru and the brother of the sitting president, Alberto Fujimori, and Foreign Affairs Minister Francisco Tudela. In Tokyo, alarm bells rang. Japan's prime minister immediately called for restraint and diplomacy. In Lima, a siege had begun. Peruvian forces quickly surrounded the residence. Negotiations began almost immediately. Over the following days, elderly guests and women were released, but over 70 hostages, mostly men, remained trapped inside, including Japanese ambassador Morohisa Aoki. The MRTA was careful to maintain a media narrative. They wanted to appear controlled, not brutal. Hostages were allowed to write letters. Some even appeared on television. But outside, President Fujimori was preparing something else entirely. Behind closed doors, President Fujimori and the Peruvian military were devising a rescue operation so complex, so risky, it could only be attempted once. They called it Operation Chavin Hunter, named after an ancient Peruvian archaeological site known for its labyrinth. For weeks, Peruvian engineers dug a network of tunnels beneath the ambassador's residence, covertly, silently, and always under threat of discovery. Surveillance microphones captured the terrorist voices. A mock-up of the house was built so commandos could rehearse. It was an operation born of desperation and precision. Meanwhile, the MRTA grew increasingly isolated. Their demands remained unmet. Days turned to weeks, weeks turned to months. By March 1997, the number of hostages had dwindled to 72, all men, including military officers and senior diplomats. Tensions inside the residence were rising. Illness and stress took their toll. Outside, President Fujimori had made his decision. On April 22, 1997, at 3:23 p.m., the signal was given. Explosive beneath the floor shook the building as Peruvian commandos stormed the residence from all sides. The whole raid lasted just 32 minutes.
Ahí hay rehenes, loco, están sacando rehenes. En la escalera.
All 14 MRTA rebels were killed. One hostage, Supreme Court Justice Carlos Guisti, was fatally wounded in the crossfire. 2 soldiers also died in the operation, but 71 hostages were rescued alive. The siege was over. The world watched in stunned admiration. The operation was hailed as a masterpiece of military precision. For President Fujimori, it was a political triumph, but questions would linger. Reports soon emerged that some MRTA rebels had been captured alive, then executed. Human rights organizations called for investigations. The Fujimori government denied the claims. Some argued that justice had been served, others that it had been denied. In the years that followed, President Fujimori's rule would unravel amid corruption scandals and human rights abuses. He would eventually flee to Japan, then be extradited and jailed. For many Peruvians, April 22, 1997 remained a day of national pride, a rare moment of unity during a decade of violence. Today, the Japanese ambassador's residence stands rebuilt, stronger, quieter. A monument nearby bears the names of those who died. The MRTA would never recover. The siege marked the group's last gasp before fading into history. But the memory lingers in testimonies, in photographs, and in the echoes of a single afternoon when a nation held its breath. The siege in Lima was not just a story of hostages and heroes. It was a mirror reflecting the complexities of terrorism, state power, and the price of peace. In the silence after the gunfire, what remains is the cost of what was saved.